Hey, Leigh-Ann, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well. I'm so excited to be here with you both.
Great to see you. I'm here with Arturo, and welcome to our SerpGuru Coffee Chats, where we're interviewing senior leaders and entrepreneurs in the startup community about their journeys, their challenges, and what insights they can share with us as we, in SerpGuru, build our growth marketing firm. So just to give some background, Leigh-Ann, she's been a huge champion of entrepreneurship in South Florida. She's been the president and director of Venture Cafe Miami, and now she's moving to Aire Ventures. She shared more about that in a little bit. But yes, for some context, we met in many entrepreneurial uh, ventures before, helping the community of young professionals building their new uh, products and solutions, including high school students. So I was very honored to met her then, and we kept in touch. And now it's great to have you here for our community to share your expertise. So without further ado, I would love for you to share with us what your new adventures are.
Excellent. Well, I'm super excited to be here. Now, with the rebrand of our organization to Aire Ventures, we're able to streamline the focus of our work exclusively around how do we help leaders and communities, ecosystems with a specific eye towards South Florida answer the question, are we ready? And READY is an acronym for racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. How do we build inclusive and accessible ecosystems, which is really just kind of the next level of the work that we started in incubating and scaling the Venture Cafe concept for the last 5 years. And so part of our work is going to be mostly consultative, being real ecosystem architects in emerging markets to really help all the parties come together and develop a roadmap, some data-driven benchmarks for accountability to grow their ecosystem in an inclusive way. But most importantly, as you know, Alfredo, and I'm sure you will learn from our conversation, Arturo, is really focusing on the founders first. How do we center the founder experience so that the resources and the opportunities are most accessible to them? And then more importantly, how do we build an ecosystem that's relational, where even though we're at different places, you can still have connections and phone calls and real meaningful relationships, because that is like the key to sustainability from my perspective. So super excited about this new focus and very excited to have also a national scope so that we can be, I hope what we're doing in Miami can really be the model for communities across the country.
That's awesome. Thanks for that introduction, Leanne. I'm very excited for you to champion that. And as I was preparing for the interview, I read that you also authored the Miami Tech Manifesto. So I would love for you to share with us what does that entail.
Yeah, so along with a group of about 20 other collaborators, we had a moment before the holiday season to say, what does it look like if we put down our principles, our guidance of who we are on paper? And we had some great discussions, and then I volunteered to be the drafter. Most people know me from the blog posts that I would write for the Venture Cafe newsletter
Right.
over the last 5 years, once a week for 5 years, gives you a lot of practice in writing. And I'm a writer by trade as a former attorney. So I got a chance to just take a lot of what we talked about and also what I've learned from building in the ecosystem with so many different partners, about 1,000 organizations we've collaborated with, to the manifesto. And what I love most about it is their principles that are both aspirational and honest. So a vision for where we can go, a
Mhm.
vision for our values, but also some honesty about where we've got some room to improve. And I think that is the key element of a manifesto, and also marketing. If you talk about growth marketing,
Right.
just being, I love companies that are authentic and honest in the way that they communicate, and so that you can feel relatable. And that's what the manifesto was designed to be. And also being clear that, Miami's getting a lot of hype, a lot of attention, but we are uniquely ourselves. And so it's a really good opportunity to look back at what our values are.
It's great timing, as you mentioned. There's been a lot of great hype around developing businesses in Miami recently. Um, I actually had a company there when I did my e-commerce business like five years ago. So I was feeling like I was ahead of the curve at that time. And now, at that point in time, there was a lot of conversation around it. And now I feel like, there is a lot of the things actually became a reality. And now there is this, how would you call it? You have a critical mass,
Yeah.
that it's starting to move faster and faster in the Miami, Florida ecosystem.
Exactly. I think, Arturo, when they talk about innovation, part of what is an opportune element of scale is timing.
Mhm.
Sometimes you're out of the gate a little bit too fast. Sometimes the market, the consumers have not yet caught up with how innovative and forward thinking your strategy is. So I know when they talk about a blue ocean strategy, it's also not going too far ahead of the market, but being innovative enough to solve a problem point where there's a room for adjustment that's more comfortable for people.
Great. Um, so our next question, Leigh-Ann, is in terms of customer acquisition. In this case, you're going to be consulting founders. So how are you planning to go about finding those founders and help them navigate their journeys?
Yeah, so just to clarify, we don't work directly with founders. We are focusing exclusively on technology and innovation
Oh,
ecosystem.
okay.
So our client, so to speak, is the I would say the ideal client is a coalition of public, private, and philanthropic dollars that really want to design a community that's equitable. And so in conversations that we have, locally in other markets, locally, our primary supporter is the Knight Foundation, which is a philanthropic entity that has a vested interest in building an inclusive and equitable ecosystem. In other markets, we've had some conversations with city government and private foundations. But it's interesting when I think about customer acquisition. I think it really depends on what you're offering in terms of a product and service. I, for example, have another project that I'm working on where we're actually scaling up this ed tech offering, and it's really think Khan Academy meets college strategy.
Okay.
And it is, college strategy coaching on demand for underserved students who wouldn't have the economic ability to pay for a college strategy coach. So as we're thinking about who our customer is and what your customer acquisition strategy is, what I always assess both from the Aire Ventures side and like that NIA project side for that product is what are the channels where they're going to reach me? And then how do I connect with those? Like, what is the best and highest use of my time based off of my talents individually as a founder and based off of what we're offering? So for the EdTech offering, we already have a network of 36 youth opportunity providers that serve the target population. And they're actually our customer because it's not like the kids are individually going to purchase a license for this.
Right.
It's purchase it in bulk. So what we do is we engage that existing network and let them, and we've positioned it so that we show the opportunity that it's providing, that it's a white labeled product that's saving them time, energy, giving them the content and curriculum that they need. And the way that we acquire them is through relationships. The same thing on the consultative side. It's more of a service-based offering versus a product-based offering. The way that I look at my customer acquisition, which is a little bit different than traditional like startup, like a strategy, is I know where I get opportunities. My opportunity generation is best found in speaking. When I do, a podcast or keynote or panels, or right now I'm in love with Clubhouse because I do not have to get dressed up and I can absolutely have a great conversation. I moderate a lot of conversations.
100% agree.
So for me, my customer acquisition strategy is looking at those connection points where I have an existing relationship and then being strategic about where I'm speaking and to whom I'm speaking and on what topics I'm speaking. So I also think that while you might have a general organizational strategy, the person leading that effort has to make sure that it matches with their strengths and their personality. I know my strengths are strategy, communication, and connection. Alfredo, you probably know that because we worked a little bit together. So that's what I lean in.
No, that's awesome. And that's a great segue for talking about business mindset, in terms of how do you go about a new venture, a new business? Do you like to bounce back ideas with friends or with a tribe of mentors, so to speak? Or do you prefer to keep it yourself at first, and then when you have something to shareable, then you go about and share that?
So it's interesting that you say that. The process, if you think about a lot of the research around how our brains work, the process of problem solving is actually creative. It's actually right-brained activity. And a lot of right-brained activity is not so linear. And so you actually need to be exposed to different things. There's a great book called Where Great Ideas Come From. There's a lot of literature that actually says that, innovation doesn't happen in a vacuum, in a silo. I know most of my best ideas come with like that flash. I spend a lot of time in reflection, thinking, spend a lot of spiritual connection time, meditation, and that's where a lot of my ideas come from. But I find that the best way to refine and develop my ideas is to have conversations, to get feedback from a group of trusted advisors, to also talk to the people that might be using it and say like, hey, what are your pain points? What are your challenges? And it's funny when I see the evolution of ideas, and some of my best ideas have taken years to evolve. It's because I've been balancing consumption and creativity, finding a good balance between kind of input and that incubation process. That's where I think the way that I'm able to refine a business model and also get it to a point where I'm ready to show someone and test and validate it.
Leigh-Ann, I had a question about, being in this new context around the pandemic. And you were talking a little bit earlier around how you go, about your customer acquisition and, talking at different venues. But I also imagine that there is a lot of like one-on-one conversations that used to happen, physically. And do you find that this new normal that is more virtual has actually made things more efficient, or have you seen some, difficulties trying to get around this the new normal?
So my background is I'm a trained lawyer, trial attorney. So if you know anything about the law, it's one of those old kind of white shoe professions where they love FaceTime, not the actual app, but you need to be in the office. And so for me, I've never been big on this remote work thing because I was trained in a law firm environment. We were very, free, but you didn't just work from home unless you had like a special arrangement.
Right.
So our team went virtual on, beginning of March. By March 15th, we were virtual. The last gathering we had that we hosted was March 5th. We had turned over 5-hour programming event into a virtual event. So I'd say on the platform side, it's been a struggle to think about how do you translate what was this magic alchemy of energy at a physical gathering into a virtual sense, but we've looked at different platforms like Remo and things like that. But I'd say on the business side, on the contacts, relationships, I love speaking virtually. I actually never want, I'm not going to say never, but I really love speaking virtually. Look, I've got a great background, I can sit at my computer. And what I love about it is sometimes I want to have notes. I can have my notes right in front of me and I can really convey a message more effectively and I can actually do more. And then I would say on a business development side or relationship development side, it's been interesting because now I have more freedom to control my calendar, but also get more in, have more conversations. So Tuesdays, sometimes Thursdays for special people are my open meeting days where I'm literally in meetings and that's what I've blocked off. And I find that I'm able to make more connections, and because we're on Zoom, it cuts through the noise. There's not as much, oh, I'm 20 minutes late because it's Miami. There's not as much, how are you? Well, like, we're here to talk about a thing. And there's also some interesting points of vulnerability that happens because of the pandemic, where you're on calls and people are like, I just started therapy because this is really getting to me. Or you get to learn a lot more about people's life circumstances that I don't think they would have felt comfortable sharing before. And the reason why I bring that up is because when we're building relationships, most of the work that I do is all relational. It's all based on, do we trust you? Do we trust your intellect, your model to engage you? That accelerated intimacy that happens when you share things about yourself that you wouldn't normally share in the quote unquote professional setting creates the psychological safety to accelerate the business relationship, to accelerate and deepen the trust. And so that's what I really like about this, not quite post pandemic, because we're still in it, but like this new era.
Got it. No, that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And I agree. Even though I'm missing the face-to-face interaction in many capacities, this allows you to really, optimize your time. You don't have to commute to many places, so you can get a lot done and be productive from home and reach a wider audience. Think about it. Our tour is in Lima, Peru. I'm here. We are in Miami, so we can talk openly and with technology. That's great. But still, you can get burnout. So with so many things going on, how do you avoid burnout, Leigh-Ann? Any insights into that?
Yes, it's interesting. So there's something I do every January. I facilitate what I call my blueprint method of goal strategy. People have their goals, but if they have no strategy, you're not actually going to accomplish your goals. And one of the things that I talk about is making time for space. And that when you're working from home, and I think this is relates to how small or how big your actual working space is, it's hard to draw boundaries. So for me, what I've loved about this moment is I have been able to draw really clear boundaries around the time that I spend for space. Space is an acronym for spiritual, physical, accountability, awareness, creative, and emotional engagement. So I'm an early riser. I get up at 3:45 or 4 a.m. every morning, but I don't start working on anything related to like my job, so to speak, until 9 a.m. Sometimes early if I have to speak or a quick call, but typically I don't even take calls before 2 p.m. because I know that my best brain activation creative time is in the morning. And then by 2 o'clock, you're not going to get the best return. So that's the best time for phone calls and meetings and things like that. But what I do in the morning is I go walk by the ocean. I walk 5 miles every morning, try to get in a HIIT workout 5 days a week. This week it's been tough, but normally about 5, 6, 7 days a week, I do some type of strength agility training. I also have started to carve out time for my asana and my whiteboarding where I'm saying, what am I doing this week? What's on my goal list? What am I really focusing and being intentional about? With my team, every morning we check in and we say, what are the 3 things we're going to try to hit today? That's it. No more than 3 because we all have other things to do. And then for me, the spiritual connection is important, but also, last year I wrote my first book. I'm now in the editing stages, but I was able to write a book and I started writing the book in like April and I was done by October. I've been thinking about it for years, but with that discipline, that time, the quietness provided, I was able to get like a 250-page book done. And then emotional engagement, just the journaling. It's really important in times where you have so much going on to have a clear outlet, whether it's therapy, whether it's like a group that you're doing fun stuff with. But for me, I've started this gratitude journal that I've been more consistent now than ever in my life, where I spend about 30, 45 minutes journaling every day. And that really helps out a lot.
Very nice. Very nice to hear that. And I guess another key theme of last year due to the pandemic has been people being able to pivot, to change gears, to reinvent themselves, you name it. But a word that I heard a lot was resilience and being resilient about the adversities. So in your journey, what has been your biggest setback as an entrepreneur? And what do you learn about it?
It's interesting. I think language is so important for framing how you approach things. So yes, I believe in setbacks, but I'm also, so for me, my faith has a lot to do with the work that I do. I say my personal mantra is people, purpose, and impact over everything else. Alfredo, you've probably heard me say that. So for me, I am driven and motivated by those things. And that helps me see setback as not a setback, but learning. I think too often we're conditioned as entrepreneurs to be outcome determinant, what's the milestone, what's the deadline, what's the output. And once I shifted my thinking to being experience and learning determinate, then I don't actually see setbacks. I see them as opportunities. Okay, this didn't work. How do we pivot? How do we change gears? What did I learn? So when I change course, I'm not going to repeat the same things. So I wouldn't say I had a big setback. I don't think I've had a big setback. I think I've just had real opportunities to think different. This past year could be characterized as a setback because about a year and a half ago, I noticed that the programming that we're doing was great, but it wasn't having the same impact that it was having in the earlier years of the Venture Cafe. And I started to ask the team, let's start doing some data analysis, some trends, some trend mapping, see what's going on. I know that it's not just my intuition. I know there's something there. We'd started to see a slight drop, but then we'd see an uptick in more specific, focused groups and gatherings. And what I realized was the ecosystem had evolved. When we started, the needs of the ecosystem were convening, connecting. There wasn't a lot of centralized programming events. And I'd like to say our work was catalytic in that it created a lot more engagement. And so that could have been a setback because I could have said, oh my God, we're failing. What I did is I started to study and I realized, oh, there's a life cycle of an ecosystem. You start at, connecting activity, then you get to more programs, and then you get to infrastructure, which is where we are now in Miami and South Florida, where we're at a critical mass, like you said, Arturo, and there needs to be more structures, more things that bring folks and the different programs together to make it more navigable. So for me, I said, well, how are we serving the community? Maybe our work with the Venture Cafe platform as a programming entity is done. Let's see where there's a gap. And we saw there's no real ecosystem architect. It used to be Knight, but Knight is a funder. They serve a different role. Who's going to architect our ecosystem around readiness? That's where we saw an opportunity and made the real pivot because communities across the states had been saying, how do we do what you do? And we didn't have a way to answer that question. Now, what could have been a setback is an opportunity for us to help more people, to focus on our core mission, and more importantly, to serve our community.
Can I ask a follow-up question around, you mentioned that now with Aire Ventures, you're going national. Are there any particular areas that you're focusing on as your kind of next areas of development?
So our strategy, and maybe this is the wrong strategy, but this is what it is right now, is where can we help? So obviously where we can help is communities that represent a emerging ecosystem, much like where we have kind of cut our teeth in Miami. I think about like where Rise of the Rest has gone. They pick emerging markets and, central, not the main hubs, places that need some infrastructure support. But beyond that, I kind of leave it up to God. Like, where am I supposed to go? And we've been getting calls. We just have some early conversations, so not ready to say exactly where yet, but we're in active conversations in about 4 or 5 different markets where they've said, we see what you're doing. And there were places where I built relationships over years, that it's not anything new, but built relationships. And now they're really saying, oh, you can help us now. You're not as tied to a specific geographic. And so it's really, where can I help? And I think when you're talking about, again, to all the work that you guys are doing, if what you're doing in terms of marketing, customer acquisition, if the focus is how can I help, then the way that you're approaching, even engaging, from the emails that you send, to the way you send the emails, to how you post your tweets, or to how you think about data, if your focus is on how I can help that experience be better because we have an offering that we know is solving a pain point, I think that you could never go wrong with trying to serve.
That's great. That's, glad to hear, and thank you for the words of encouragement. And going back to the point about being data-driven and highly analytical to understand the customer needs or the audience needs, any recommendations? What are your favorite analytical tools to drive data-driven decisions, if you will?
So I think that there are platform tools, and then there are bespoke tools that relate to the specific industry you're in. So I'd say, like, first, always understand, like, what is it that you're trying to look for? What are the data points? What are your KPIs, your metrics? And then what are the industry standards in your particular market? Because if you're in economic development, you know, there's specific things and resources and reports out there. But right now, we just onboarded a really great platform that I'm super excited about called UpMetrics. And they've traditionally worked with nonprofits, but they are kind of an all-in-one, it's not just data visualization, but they work with you to think about how do you develop these dynamic dashboards around multiple data sources. And I have always been a fan of data to help drive and inform the strategy so that you can make sure you're actually being responsive. And so that's what I'm excited about. And then the other things that we use is we use just the old school logic model. We develop a logic model for every single program or initiative that we are running, including the consulting work. So we have a model for assessing ecosystems, and we actually are partnering with an organization to help release a community-wide scorecard on readiness for our ecosystem. So again, that's more bespoke for our work, but UpMetrics is a great platform. We use Tableau. It was good, but it didn't have what we really needed. And I really, really am excited about UpMetrics.
I have one last question from my side, Leigh-Ann. Great conversation so far. And is there any fun fact that we don't know about you that you want to share with the audience?
Well, it's fun fact. I kind of like spilled the beans today, but like for me, I love storytelling. I used to want to be a film score composer. I studied piano and I have a minor in piano performance. So I studied music most of my life. And so I got a chance during the pandemic to work on my first documentary. So the trailer we just kind of released today. If you go on my Instagram, you'll see it. But the process was amazing because what I saw in my head when we were editing the trailer and I was putting in order with my DP was exactly what it turned out to be. And so right now we're in the final post-production of releasing the 3. It's an episodic because who wants to sit down for 25 minutes and watch something, but it's an episodic mini documentary that we are going to be releasing very, very soon. So that's something people may not know about me.
Congratulations.
Very nice. We'll keep an eye on that.
And that's in addition to your book.
Yes, in addition to the writing.
Very creative year. Very creative year, to say the least. Yeah.
Yes.
Certainly 2020 was super prolific.
Yeah, and I'm even more excited about 2021. Awesome.
Arturo, do you have any questions for Leigh-Ann?
I'm okay.
So Leigh-Ann, it's been a pleasure to have you here in our coffee chat. I know it's going to be many times in the future we see each other. Wish you all the best with Aire Ventures and keep us posted on your creative endeavors, and we'll keep you posted as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure to just sit down and have a good conversation. And if I can ever be a resource, let me know. And I'm wishing you guys really the best of luck.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Take care.